Imagine you live in a group of 150 people. Everyone has watched you since birth. Everyone knows exactly how you behave when food runs short, when someone is sick, when a stranger arrives at camp uninvited. Now, imagine trying to choose a partner in that world, not based on a first date, not based on a profile, based on a lifetime of evidence that the entire group has already seen and silently judged. That is the world partner selection actually evolved inside. There was no privacy in that world, not the kind we mean by the word now. Your reputation was not something you managed, it was something that simply existed, built moment by every person who had ever watched you respond to a crisis, share food, break a promise, or keep one. By the time you were old enough to consider a partnership, the entire group already had an opinion about who you were, and that opinion mattered more than anything you could say about yourself in the moment. This changes everything about how partner selection actually worked, because it was never a private decision between two people. It was a public verification process. The individual's attraction was real, and it mattered, but it was one input feeding into a much larger evaluation that involved parents, elders, and the entire kin network on both sides. A partnership was not a bond between two people. It was an alliance between two families, assessed by people who had decades more observational evidence than the two individuals falling for each other. And the evidence they were gathering was specific. The first thing the group watched for was competence, not appearance, not charm. Competence, demonstrated and witnessed over years. Among the Hadza of Tanzania, a man's hunting success is still one of the strongest predictors of his desirability as a long-term partner. Not because hunting itself is romantic, but because hunting success is a visible, undeniable signal of physical health, environmental knowledge, patience, and persistence that the entire group has watched accumulate over years of hunts. Everyone in camp knows who comes back with meat and who does not. There is no way to fake that reputation. It is built one hunt at a time in full view of everyone who will eventually have an opinion about whether you make a good partner. Women's competence was witnessed with equal precision. Among forager societies, the caloric contribution of women's gathering consistently equals or exceeds that of men's hunting. A woman who knew exactly which plants were edible, which were medicinal, and which sources stayed productive through a dry season was not interchangeable with one who did not know those things. And the entire group knew which woman had which knowledge because they had watched her use it season after season for years. The second thing the group watched for was coalition value. Because a partner was never just one person. A partner was a gateway to an entire network. Their siblings became your allies. Their parents became additional resources you could call on. Their cousins became potential trading partners across territories you could not access alone. Researchers studying the Hadza have found that a woman's mother being actively present and involved measurably reduces child mortality. Not slightly. Significantly. This is one of the most robustly documented findings in evolutionary anthropology, and it explains why marrying into a strong, engaged kin network was never a social nicety. It was survival infrastructure, and everyone in camp could see exactly which families brought that infrastructure and which did not. The third thing being assessed operated at a level the group could not see at all. In 1993, biologist Klaus Wedekind discovered that women could detect immune system compatibility through smell alone, without any conscious awareness of what they were detecting. The major histocompatibility complex, a cluster of genes governing pathogen recognition, produces chemical signals the human nose reads automatically. Partners with different MHC profiles produced children with broader immune coverage. In a world with no medicine, that difference was the gap between a child who lived and one who did not. While the group was watching observable behavior, biology was running its own silent verification process underneath. One that had been operating since long before there were words to describe it. But across dozens of anthropological studies examining what traits forager societies consistently valued most in long-term partners, the single quality that appeared at the top of nearly every list was not hunting skill, not physical strength, and not even kin network size. It was what researchers called pro-social behavior, generosity, reliability, the willingness to share resources even when your own were scarce, the tendency to show up when things were genuinely difficult instead of disappearing. This was not sentiment. It was the most observable, most consistently tracked trait of all, because in a group where everyone watched everyone, Generosity and reliability were impossible to fake over any meaningful length of time. You could perform kindness once, you could not perform it for 15 years in front of 150 witnesses who were all quietly keeping score. A reputation for showing up when things were hard predicted exactly what it sounds like it would predict. Whether your children would be helped by the group during a crisis, whether allies would appear when illness struck, whether the partnership itself would hold when conditions became genuinely desperate. And because none of this evaluation happened in private, courtship itself became a visible, communal demonstration of exactly these traits. Among the Kongsan, young men spend months giving gifts before any formal partnership is even discussed. Not romantic gestures, evidence. Each gift was proof of hunting success, of generosity, of sustained effort over time, witnessed and discussed by the entire camp as it happened. Among the Ache, a man's social standing inside the group is one of the strongest predictors of his attractiveness to women, precisely because social standing in a forager band is earned through the exact combination of competence, reliability, and generosity that the whole group had already been watching for years. The signal and the substance were never separate things. The courtship was simply the public confirmation of evidence everyone already had. This is what ancient partner selection was actually doing. It was building a survival network in public, one verified bond at a time. The partnership was the foundation. The kin networks it connected were the walls. The coalition of allies it activated was the roof. Every trait the group was evaluating, every trait your own attraction was responding to without you fully understanding why, was a structural element in that building. Not decoration, infrastructure, assembled in full view of everyone who would eventually depend on it holding. Modern humans inherited every part of that evaluation system. The pull toward competence, the instinct to assess coalition value, the biological reading of compatibility you cannot consciously detect, the deep, disproportionate weighting of character over almost everything else. All of it is still running. Except now it operates almost entirely without witnesses. There is no group of 150 people who watched the person you are drawn to handle a crisis, share their last resources, or show up during the hardest stretch of someone else's life. You are running an evaluation system built for total transparency inside a world that gives you almost none, which means the system your ancestors trusted because it had decades of public evidence behind it is now operating mostly on guesswork. It is still asking the same questions it always asked. It simply has far less evidence to answer them with, and it has no idea that anything has changed.